Chapter 16. The feeling of love for your spouse. I've never met anyone who at their core didn't want a deep, loving relationship with their spouse. But I knew of very few examples where people who had been together for a long time still seemed as in love with each other as when they'd first met. In fact, the phenomenon seemed to be so rare that I doubted whether it was possible for the vast majority of people to keep those loving feelings alive over a long term relationship. But as the years passed and I deepened my understanding of the inside out nature of our reality, I met a number of couples who had been together for decades and who were still deeply in love. In fact, many of them told me they were more in love than they had ever been, and it showed. How could this be? One night, when I was away from home running an immersion event for men, I lay in my hotel bed thinking about my wife. I smiled as I recalled how beautiful she looked on our wedding day. I felt so much love for her that day. Then I remembered back to a year earlier when one evening, again lying on my hotel bed during another immersion event, I decided I was going to propose to her. I started scheming and planning about how to make the proposal absolutely perfect. Once again, I felt the loving feelings I had felt for my wife during that time. At the time of writing, my wife and I have not been married all that long, just a couple of years. From time to time, once we started living together, which we only did after we got married, we have had some small disagreements. These tended to be over really small, mundane stuff, which friends and family told me was completely normal when two people first move in together. Which way should we stack the plates on the drying rack? How much can we load into the washing machine? We were still very much in love with each other, but I'd be lying if I said I felt the same way each day as I did on our wedding day. Now, I was lying in my hotel bed that night in Birmingham. What occurred to me was that the memories that seemed to be generating those loving feelings were happening right in that moment. The feelings were real in that moment. I didn't need to think back to last year or to our wedding day to feel loved up. I could be loved up at any moment with her. A huge smile spread across my face as I realized this, and a feeling of love filled my whole body. The next day, when we spoke, I stayed in that loving feeling, and the conversation simply became an incredibly loving one. I couldn't wait to see her once I was back home, and the feeling was reciprocated. It was so incredibly simple to have the loving relationship that I wanted. As an aside, I realized that amongst many men, it's not cool to talk about loving your wife. I often get the impression that men like to talk in terms of control. My wife does this for me, she does that for me. We don't want to come across as whipped or henpecked. However, I believe that deep down, most men want to have deeply loving feelings for their partners, and they want these feelings to be reciprocated. In such situations, control is simply unnecessary. I believe that men's desire for control often stems from insecurity about their spouse and a misunderstanding of the nature of loving feelings. If my wife is the source of my loving feelings, then it might make sense to control the relationship so I can ensure those loving feelings remain in my life. However, if I see that my loving feelings are a reflection of my own thinking about my wife, the control isn't necessary. What's more, seeing things this way is also a gift to your spouse. You're not putting any pressure for your own happiness on them. They can simply be, and you can appreciate them as they are. Are you open to letting your feelings of love for your spouse, or your friends, or parents for that matter, rise up right now without trying to control them, without thinking about what annoys you or what you're upset about? Oh, that's a good one, isn't it? Starting to think about relationships, significant relationships, such as with partners, spouses, parents, kids, that kind of thing. It so looks to us like loving feelings only come from the way that people behave towards us. So they look very conditional. And because they look conditional in that way, they're scarce because often people aren't behaving in the way that we would particularly want them to behave in order to generate the feelings. So the great advantage with this is you don't need someone to behave in a particular way to have beautiful feelings towards them. They don't have to be saying all the right things, doing all the right things. All of your conditions can come off them, and you're free just to love them exactly as they are. Now, if you've ever had the experience of somebody loving you completely unconditionally, like regardless of how you are in the world, you'll know how liberating that can be. Just how magical it can be when someone doesn't need you to be a certain way. So we can really start to enjoy ourselves and each other for no particular reason other than just enjoying. How amazing is that? See you on the next video.